Alright, so today we're continuing our journey of refreshing this Volkswagen by putting new floor pans in it. Alright, engine's put away. Now my next step is to clean up all the bits and bobs that are on this thing, on the pan itself. So we've got these rubber strips here that go between the pan and the frame. I'm gonna take those off, set those aside, and like battery ground cable, that thing. On this side we've got the pedal assembly needs to come off. This brake line that runs down through the middle, this needs to come out as well. And then we should be down to just bare frame, and then we can think about how we're gonna cut it out of here. All right, and so with the 13mm wrench, I can remove the negative cable there, and the positive cable removes from the actual starter itself and then slides through the pan there, the belly pan kind of thing. And now we've got our little rubber strips along the sides. All right, so next I'm gonna remove the pedal assembly from the front here. And so to do that, we got a couple bolts. There's one bolt there holding it to the tunnel, and there's another one over there as well. Take those two bolts out, and then we've got this little thing that attaches it to the actual master cylinder over here. And so I have to undo those bolts as well. All right, and I've also got this throttle, the cable right here. Take that guy off. Now we just have to disconnect it from the master cylinder. From down here to where the clutch is connected to the transmission, and I'll loosen this guy here. All right, so I've got this wire here. It runs through part of the frame there, and it connects to the starter back here. I'm going to disconnect it from the starter and run it through here and pull it out. All right, so the brake line runs through the frame here. We need to remove it from the frame. So in order to do that, I have to disconnect it here at this juncture up here, as well as up here on the master cylinder itself. I'm also going to move the master cylinder back out. All right, so I've removed the master cylinder completely, gotten that out of here, because all this paint, I'm going to have to get in here and clean up all this paint and redo all that. So let's look at opening up this box here and taking out our new pans. I'm gonna try lifting up the frame, just one side of it, with the hoist here. Seeing how much access that gives me. I'm not sure how much access I really need at this point. I do know that it's easier to cut the pans out from the bottom. All right, and now from the underside, you can better see how there's like this little ridge down here. And we want to cut to the outside of that ridge just slightly. So, and the ridges are really only visible on the underside. And you can also see the ridge at the front here. There's that ridge there. Cut to the side of that as well. All right, then the last holdup is this. There's this little spot right there. So I don't know how that's welded on there or what. All right, now I'm gonna try and remove this bit of metal that's on this little pointy part here. Yeah, it looks like it is welded on there. All right, I think it's time to get out the air chisel and see how that works. See if we can make it work. All right, so this part here is welded in pretty good. And there's a number of layers on top of that thing. But I was able to get that apart for the most part, and I'm going to do the rest with a grinder and just grind it down to the basics. And then it's a similar story over here at the rear of the vehicle. It's actually got a full weld right up and through here. And to grind all this stuff out as well. All down through the tunnel here though, that's all spot welded. About every 2 inches there's a spot weld. At this point I made a pretty good mess here. I've also got everything in here cleaned up to a degree. At least I've got all the old pan off of here. I've gone through chiseled. I've gone through and with the high-speed grinder and ground down a bunch of this stuff to get down to the where we're starting from. Now I just got to go ahead and clean everything up, and I'm starting to fit the pan on here, and that's kind of interesting. So if you look in this corner, there's just sort of a pile of like metal weld and everything in this corner, and that is supposed to stay there. So I don't need to grind that down, because if you look correspondingly at our new pan here, you go to that same corner, you can see it's actually raised up in that corner, so they want you to leave that. Other than that, my basic plan here, I think, is to get both sides taken out and cleaned up, and then we'll get everything prepped for welding. We'll set the pans on there, and then we're going to roll this thing back underneath the car, and then we'll tack it in along like the middle tunnel here, then take it out and then weld in everything else. Alright, here it is. That's a day's work. Got both pans out. The little seams here where I'm going to spot weld, all cleaned up for the most part. I'm going to go over them again to really clean them up, but they're mostly cleaned up at this point. I've got the parts down here where it was fully welded. I've got all that ground down. There's no trace of the old welds. I got this side here with the little hook thing cleaned up. And then up front here, I did some patching, some metal patching in here. There was a bunch of rust, some rust holes like there are still on this side, so I gotta do some more patching over there tomorrow. Alright, it's not so much that I think this is fantastic, stellar work as it is that I've spent the last like 3 hours doing it. And I want someone to see it, because it will be completely covered up by the floor pan. The floor pan comes in through here and goes over this part here, and then the body sits on top of all this. You'll never ever see this, but I've spent a decent amount of time going through and cutting out all the rust. These all had little pockets of rust that were all the way through, cutting all that out and making this little patch here to go in and fit in nicely like that. So now I'm going to go ahead and weld that in, and you'll never know it's there. Thanks. Alright, I think I've got all the little patchwork done up here, and then I'm going through, I'm grinding off some of this flaking paint, this junk right here, grinding that off, like right up in here. I already ground some of that off with the mega grinder, and getting stuff ready, prepped for paint. I'm gonna go through, grind, and then rust treat with rust dissolver. See that gun up there? That blue thing that says Speed Blaster? I don't think that's moved in 20 years. We're gonna get it down and see if it still works. Still got sandblast and stuff in it. Alright, so this it's made in the USA. Wow. Alright, sand flow on, off. So it's off. I'm gonna turn it on. I'm gonna blow some sand out of this thing. Looks like play sand. Alright, let's see what damage we can do. That's for outdoor use only. Holy crap. Which means we're going outdoors. Let's try it again. So yeah, that works pretty good. You can see this bare metal section right here where I was sandblasting. It definitely works. But that stuff, you need to wear gloves and protective equipment, because it will bounce back and sandblast your hands too. Alright, I've got things cleaned up quite a bit here. It looks significantly better than it did. I've got it stripped down. All the cracked up paint and everything is off of there. My next step is to go ahead and put some rust dissolver on this and treat the rust that I can see here. Alright, so I've got the frame basically as clean as I'm going to get it. I did a whole bunch of rust treatment and stuff on here, a lot of grinding, some sandblasting, everything I could do within my limited single man powers or whatever to like get this thing cleaned up. And so did I get 100% of the rust? No, definitely did not do that. But I've significantly knocked it down, and hopefully that will hold this thing for decades into the future. We'll see, I don't know. So now our next step is to get these pans prepped and ready to go onto the frame, which means some grinding on the pans to remove the paint to nice shiny metal, and also mainly drilling holes about every 2 inches going down where it connects to the tunnel here. And it also involves, I need to do some painting on the actual frame down here and get things prepped, because once I get the pans on there, I'm not going to be able to access those spots. Alright, so looking at the tunnel here and the little ridge on the tunnel, you can kind of see where some of the old spot welds were. Like there's a good example right here. This little guy right there. That's where a spot weld was originally. And so you can kind of get an idea of how they're spaced to a degree on here. So in terms of planning how to drill the holes on the new pan, so I'm going to use this guy here. It's an adjustable square, so I can, move this knob and adjust this guy in and out. And I've adjusted it so that it's kind of hits, like if you look at that guy right there, I've got this adjusted in such a way that it hits about halfway or so in the center of the old spot weld. I'm going to try and use the square as a general guide, and it's because this is not exact, because even on these spot welds you can see that it wasn't perfectly straight originally. So I want to try and do these about every 2 inches, because that's how the stock one was. I'm going to go along here and mark them with a nice little silver Sharpie. Alright, I've done some limited spot welding before, and one thing I have learned is that the size of the hole you drill to fill with the weld is actually important. It's possible to have that hole be too small, and at that point you're not getting enough of an arc, enough heat to the material you're trying to weld through on the other side of the hole to make a good weld, and those welds will just break right off. What I'm going to try out here is a 5/16 drill bit. I'm going to go through here right now and center punch these ones, and I'm going to do every other hole. I've got it marked every inch, and I'm going to do every 2 inches I'm going to actually drill a hole. Alright, I've got all my holes marked on the second one. I'm going to try something else in terms of doing the center punch. I'm going to try putting it in here and center punching it while it's on here. The advantage of such, in theory, is that it's got a hard backing behind it, and it should be easy just to punch it through there, and maybe even quicker. Alright, so here are both my 4 pans. They're in, and I think what I'm going to actually do, I thought about tacking this in like a 1 or 2 spots to hold it, and then roll it underneath the body, and then bolt it down here, and then come in and do some actual spot welds and everything, and then take it off the body, roll it out, and fill in all the spot welds. Sort of get it where it's supposed to be by rolling underneath the body and actually bolting it on. Because the hardest part about these apparently is making sure these body holes are lined up. I believe that process will give me the best opportunity to get everything lined up appropriately. But instead of just putting a tack weld in here, I think I'm just going to throw a magnet on here, which seems a lot simpler. I just throw a magnet right about there.
probably look over here and go, what the hell is this?
Yeah, he probably looking over here going, what the hell are they building over there? All right, so we're pretty closely aligned and everything. If you look at the body mounts up here, there's 2 body mounts on the front here, and these guys are spot on where we want them. And on the back, we've got these other 2. They're underneath the wheel wells, these guys. And this one is lined up right there. And the same for the one on this side over here. This is also lined up nicely. I'm gonna go ahead and start throwing bolts in these. So throw some bolts in these guys, the ones in the front. And then I'll go ahead and put some bolts on the one on the pan, on the bottom here on the side, and get that lined up, and then we'll go ahead and start spot welding stuff inside. All right, so I've got it indoors, and I'm using a hoist back here to help me sort of shimmy things around a bit. And then I'm on the bottom here looking at trying to align these bolts. And if you can see on the bottom, things are, I mean, I can get a bolt in there. It's not perfectly aligned, but I can get a bolt in there. And if we look at some other ones, like that one, could use some help. Still off a little bit. Most of them are pretty close. There's just a few in this midsection here, just right around where the door seam is, right around there. There's a few that are off. So, all right, we've now got all of our bolts along the sides in there, finger tight. I've got the bolts on the front and the back, like this guy here, on there, finger tight. And then inside, I've got things aligned so that everything's just pretty close to the tunnel. For the most part, it's right on the tunnel. These 2 bolts back here, that guy was not hard, but then this guy over here, it was just not lined up very well over there. But we got it, so I'm gonna go ahead and start spot welding some stuff in here. All right, I'm working on aligning the other side. I've got this side sort of tacked in a couple spots so that I don't think it's gonna move anywhere. But if you look over on the other side, you can see how it bolts in right there and right over there, and how the black wall on the bottom aligns with this white body on top there. And if you come over here, it might be hard to see, but the black wall on the bottom is not aligning at all with the top up here, which is interesting. It's almost like that wall itself needs to be bent forward a little bit. On the front part, it's all the way up to the wall on the front, but yet that is pushed back quite a bit. And that could totally be something just in the shipping, it got bent or whatever, but in terms of fitting it, I'm very glad I'm putting it on the body first before I welded anything. All right, so it turns out the first pan I did on the driver's side was the easy pan. I've now been working on the pan on the passenger side for like, I don't know how many hours now, and so it's a bit of a pain to get everything fitted up and the bolt holes aligned, and I've had to take the car back outside, put it back on the cherry picker, and lift it up and down several times, just enough so I can get that pan out, adjust things, and put it back in. I'm now refabricating that pan to a small degree to get it to fit in there, meaning that I'm cutting pieces out here and there, or cutting notches in the metal here and there so that I can more easily bend and adjust it so that it can fit in there. Now, surprisingly, this bolt here is a pivotal aspect in this pan redo, because it's taken me hours to get this bolt to line up. And boy, am I happy it finally did. All right, so now I've got that in there. I'm gonna go ahead and check the other bolts on the side and see how they are now. So far, so good. They're all working. All right, so things are lining up now finally to a satisfying degree on the driver's or on the passenger side of the vehicle. And I've got things bolted down so they're in the place where we want them to be, and I'm going to now roll this Volkswagen back into the garage so we can begin welding it. We're back in the shop for our final plug welding. All right, big moments here. We finally got the pans welded in. The little seams here are primered, and now my next step is to do some seam sealer. I'm just waiting for the primer to dry, and then we're gonna throw this guy on there. Seam sealer. I got it from the local auto parts store. So underneath here, this is what it looks like. We've got our nice little seam going down the middle between the tunnel and the pan. We're gonna want to get in right here and put some of that seam sealer and seal it up so water does not get in between the two panels. Alright, so I'm going to go in and get in here with some mineral spirits and clean that seam before I seal it in order to make sure that it's clean as possible so that the seal will stick to it the way we want. Alright, I've got everything cleaned off down here, and then after that, using this just like using any kind of caulk. So I've got a caulk gun right here, and then I just got to cut the tip off this sucker. Well, that was interesting. And then poke a hole through there, right? Right? Oh yeah, look at that. Alright, so we've got our seam sealer on the bottom there, and it's been on there for a good hour or so now, so it should be dry. And now I'm going to go ahead and rubber coat the bottom of the pans. Alright, rubber coating on the bottom, done. We've also got some rubber coating on the top, right here in this front compartment here. Done. Now we just need to do some spray painting on the pan inside here, and we will be done with this portion of the project. So that's it for this video. All I'm going to do next is put all the bolts back in the pan, on the inside of the car, on the bottom, on the sides, on the front and the trunk here, and the ones in the rear wheel wells back there, and then we're going to move on to other projects. Eventually I'm going to have to put the gas tank back in and hook up the wiring again, all that sort of stuff. But it's really simple on this car. If you can take it apart, you can put it back together. So next video we're going to move on to repairing that rear quarter panel, sort of that bumper connection back there. I've got the part in, the new piece of body panel to stick in there. Cross your fingers and wish us luck, because I hope that that works out well. See you next time. Keep on wrenching, everybody. Thanks for watching.